Hello, my name is Martin Rodriguez. I'm the Cultural and Linguistic Competence Manager for the New Mexico Systems of Care and the New Mexico Communities of Care. Here today with me is also Fred Sandoval, who serves as a consultant to the Systems of Care and Communities of Care. Today we'll be presenting and sharing information on two booklets that serve as user guides to communities of care and individuals and organizations in your community. The first booklet and the first part of the video will be on the culturally and linguistic appropriate services standards. The second and last portion of the video will be on the organizational, cultural, and linguistic competence self-assessment. Both of these user guides can be found on our website, NMSOC.org. There you will find not only the booklets, but training information and additional information related to cultural and linguistic competence. So to begin, let me start off by asking some questions to Fred Sandoval regarding the CLAS standards. Fred, what are the CLAS standards?
Martin, great question. The CLAS standards, and that's the acronym for Culturally and Linguistic Appropriate Services, speaks to something that was established in the year 2000, and these were standards developed by the Office of Minority Health, by the Department of Health and Human Services. They were recently revised, Martin, in the spring of this year, and those particular standards really are three pieces. One, they relate to guidance, they relate to recommendations and requirements of healthcare agencies and how to appropriately serve diverse communities. The purpose of the CLAS standards, Martin, are to help to eliminate and reduce disparities experienced by diverse communities in our country.
Considering disparities in New Mexico, how will the CLAS standards address physical and mental health disparities?
Martin, there is no doubt that the CLAS standards and those being adopted by the agencies really will be intended to do three things. One is to improve access to services. Two is to improve the retention of individuals in care. And critically, and most importantly, the third point is to improve the outcomes for the individuals who receive services from healthcare agencies.
So in New Mexico, what organizations are required or should be using the CLAS standards?
Martin, the question is very clear, and the answer is basically this. Healthcare and health agencies are required to adopt these CLAS standards. That includes hospitals, community, clinic settings, inpatient and outpatient providers. These are locations in communities throughout New Mexico where individuals, families, youth, and other consumers can come receive services. So those are the agencies that are required to have adopted and implemented the CLAS standards.
In New Mexico, when we're talking about families, youth, individuals, how will the CLAS standards affect or help them?
What's unique about the CLAS standards is because it really involves organizations on one hand and individuals who receive those services, the CLAS standards can be a benefit to families in a number of ways. One is we often know that consumers and families can work in healthcare agencies, so it helps them so they're able to know that the cultural and linguistic needs of their families and communities are being met. The other is consumers, families, and peers and other consumers can actually serve as volunteers. They can actually sit on the board of directors. And then lastly, what's important is that the communities, including consumers, youth, and family members, can actually give input into the community needs of diverse populations in those communities through needs assessment, planning processes, and the work of organizations. So there's a way to be fully engaged in participating and as a result of agencies who adopt the CLAS standards.
So the CLAS standards can really help not only the youth, families, and individuals in our communities, but it can also help the organizations in their implementation to improve services.
That's absolutely right.
What's available and out there to help organizations adopt the CLAS standards?
Well, we have several things that are in play. One, and first and foremost, is the Communities of Care program is actually designed to provide training and technical assistance to help agencies learn about the standards, share the information, and then more importantly is to provide training and technical assistance. And there's a few other things that come with that. One is the fact that the Office of Minority Health has developed a blueprint, Martin, that actually is really a how-to. It's like a guidebook. It's a how-to, how to implement these standards. And that tool is an excellent way for organizations to not just learn about them, but how to apply them. So then lastly, there's this whole part about how to unfold these, roll these out. Communities of Care is going to be an incredible resource for helping to do that,
Yes.
to ensure that we address the cultural and linguistic needs of families throughout New Mexico, and so much to the credit of the Department of Children, Youth, and Families.
For the blueprint, again, it can be found on our website, nmsoc.org, and it will be available for systems of care and communities of care. Thank you very much, Fred, for that information on the CLAS standards. That was very helpful. And now I'm going to hand it off to you.
Thank you, Martin. So this next segment has to do with how organizations can conduct a cultural linguistic competency self-assessment. So Martin, I have 5 questions for you.
Sure.
And so let's start with the first question. What I have here is a user's guide for something called an organizational self-assessment. But what is an organizational self-assessment?
Sure. It can really be thought in something much more simple, such as a survey. And that can be used as a tool for organizations to assess the degree in which the services that they provide are culturally and linguistically appropriate, that the staff is demographically represents the service population. It also assesses how well the staff is trained in the areas of culture and language. And then lastly, it also takes a look at policies and procedures of that organization.
Thank you, Martin. So let me ask you this question. How is it that the assessment can actually help the clients that these agencies serve?
Sure. The survey is an opportunity for the organization to look if they're meeting the culture and language needs of the diverse youth, families, and individuals in our communities here in New Mexico.
I see. So once an assessment is completed, then how is it that the findings are used?
Sure. I'll also share that we've set up the link for this survey online so that individuals of that organization can actually go to it, and then their information can be protected in terms of their anonymity and the confidentiality. Once they complete the survey, then we'll take a look at the findings and the data, and we'll ask the organization to create a smaller subcommittee, cultural and language diversity subcommittee, and then they'll look at the strengths of the findings and then take the opportunity to look at the other findings of that survey as means to improve services, and again how they hire staff, how they train staff, and then the policies and procedures of that organization.
That's excellent. Martin, so now tell us, how is it that the consumers, family, and youth can be involved in this assessment process?
Sure, there's at least 2 ways that youth, families, and individuals of the community can be involved. First is a volunteer. Anybody can generally volunteer for service providers in your community. And as I mentioned, when you go online to take the survey, everyone in the organization, from volunteers all the way up to the board of directors, can take the survey. The second way is if you're receiving services, you can ask to be part of the subcommittee that I mentioned earlier that spends time looking at the survey results, and then as a small committee with support from us as well, look at all the individual findings, the strengths, and then the opportunities for growth.
That's excellent. Martin, thank you so much for answering that question. So Dana, how is it that communities of care can help agencies use this assessment instrument?
Sure, we can provide support to those communities and those individuals in their communities to approach the organizations that provide services, and then together they can work at implementing the survey. Together they can look at the findings of the survey, look at the strengths that they're already doing really well, and then the other opportunities for growth. An example could be the materials that are found in the organization's front office, the lobby, that they're also in the language of the individuals of that community, as well as that the lobby or the area that is for the public in their organization is welcoming and open and feels comfortable for families and the service recipients.
That's excellent. Martin, I want to thank you for taking the time to be able to share this information, and more importantly, to be able to know that our communities of care communities and agencies and providers can help the families.
Well, Fred, thank you very much for helping presenting this information in a much more user-friendly format.
You're welcome.
And this concludes our video for the user guide booklet on the CLAS standards and the user guide booklet for the cultural and linguistic competence self-assessment. And in closing, let me remind you to go to our website, NMSOC.org, where you can find the actual booklets, examples of the survey, additional training information, and more information on cultural and linguistic